Nick Hart-Williams again. We're live from the Klima Forum in downtown Copenhagen, and our guest now is from the United States, a very distinguished professor of environmental economics. Is that right, John?
That's right.
Environmental economics at the University of Middlebury, is that how?
Middlebury College.
Middlebury College, excuse me, it's a long time. Middlebury College in the States, one of the more distinguished independent institutions in America. So, over to John. Welcome, John.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here, Nick.
Now, when we first talked, you said something intriguing to me, which, and I'm just going to throw you right in because I was fascinated. You said it's been a life-changing experience, COP15. Do tell.
So I've never done a COP. I'm a COP rookie. And I arrived knowing, as I was saying to you over lunch, that it would be life-changing. But I thought it would be life-changing because I was around heads of state and celebrities and the rest of it. But it's been life-changing in a different way. I thank my wife, who gave me the advice as I was getting ready to leave. She said, don't take photographs, don't film in the first day or two. You have to essentially be here now. Just take it in. So I've taken that attitude of just taking in every moment, talking who I end up talking to next to the train, waiting in line at the Bella Center. And the result has been amazing. I have met 4 or 5 dozen people with whom I intend to follow up, not in a facile way, but in a deep way. I've learned about all the social change agents that are out there. And as I mentioned to you, I did a book called Ignition, What You Can Do to Fight Global Warming and Spark a Movement. And our main theme in there was that social change is one conversation at a time. I've sort of understood that, but being in this context this week, I see it. We're going to win this fight, I think, if we're lucky, but it's going to be because of not so much what happens at the Bella Center, I believe, but moreover the connections we make and the way we convert those into real, scalable solutions as soon as we can.
So, John, is it life-changing then in the sense of some of the ideas you've had, or just the connections, or take me a bit further on it?
So, as I was mentioning to you over lunch, Nick, I think there are many narratives of Copenhagen. There's the narrative of all the diplomats coming. There's the narrative of power, north-south. There's the narrative of businesses who are also sure they have the answer and they're going to make a profit. The narrative that I like and fits into why it's changed me so much is, as I suggested, of the social change agent. The work I've done with my students at Middlebury College is about that. How do you affect change in small groups and so forth? In fact, my students, I'm very proud to say, were the founders with my colleague Bill McKibben of Step It Up and 350.org. So I've learned an infinite amount next to them and with them. And it's that premise of not looking to big institutions for change, not getting worked up about big, larger issues that you can't control. It's saying that it's one action at a time and then asking how to scale up. So that's what I see around here. There's a lot of reasons to be discouraged, let's face it. I think the nexus of hope is regarding what Paul Hawken writes about in Blessed Unrest, this emerging civil society movement that has no name and has no leader. It's an organism. If your viewers haven't read Blessed Unrest, it's a brilliant book, and it captures this organic aspect of this growing movement that involves environmental groups, indigenous rights, and people who are trying to set the world right. So I see that, and it's been brilliant, really brilliant.
Let's just go back on that a moment, because I think you've probably been witness to, participant in one of the most extraordinary social movements in recent times, certainly in the United States. So there you are. You're at this wonderful college up in Vermont. You've got a scholar in residence. I think he is Bill McKibben, who's a great writer, and you got a bunch of students of international environmental economics. And then what happened?
So I have to say that it's also environmental studies because it's all disciplines. And I had done a class, Nick. We have a mini semester in January, 4 weeks, and I had done one 2003 on trying to make our campus carbon neutral. And I went to a workshop where there were scholars in social movements and sustainability subsequent to doing that class, in which a handful of us began to realize that there was evidence of an emerging climate movement. Bill, of course, with End of Nature, had rang the bell almost 20 years ago this fall. Jim Hansen, Al Gore, many leaders had a lot to say. People like Eben Goodstein, my colleague who is now at Bard College, runs their environmental program, their master's program, were training folks to be change agents against global warming long before Al Gore came along and did it. So there was evidence of that. So I decided to do a new class, 2007 it was, 2005, January 2005, called Building the New Climate Movement. Magical experience, 20 students, myself, a colleague. We read 6 books in 8 days, including books about social change, The Tipping Point, Don't Think of an Elephant, about how do you frame, books about affecting change. And then it culminated with a 3-day conference. It was over 120 people, which had many of the leaders of the movement as we've come to know it. Billy Parrish, who's one of the founders of Energy Action, John Pasquitano of Greenpeace, and most importantly, this new generation of leaders that includes now many of those colleagues who were young at the time and now are the new generation of leaders. So to the degree that I've played a role, it's bringing people together, being a connector. I'm told I'm a connector, and so it's been really fantastic. And that's honestly, very personally, you can imagine, extremely rewarding for me to see my students here, actually, very much.
Absolutely. And how did that lead to 350?
Well,
the tie of which you are wearing.
They, with Bill, they teamed up and did a walk, the first rally of understood open source approaches using the internet and so forth. So Step It Up, in an extraordinary way, brought the goal of 80% by 2050 into the legislative process. They succeeded. People weren't talking about that, and then Obama and Clinton talked about 80% by 2050 because of rallies that happened all over the U.S. Bill and his colleagues said we got to go global, and Jim Hansen and Bill were in communication about the 350 ppm target. What did they do? They said, well, that number, and it's actually good that it's a number because every language uses those numbers, needs to be, as Bill says, not just the most important number in the world, but the best known. Needs to be, as Bill says, not just the most important number in the world, but the best known. And I'm sure I speak with them, not just the most important number in the world, but the best known. And I'm sure I speak with them that they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. It is amazing. They're miracle workers. They work about 25 hours a day. I've seen them all off and on, and they're utterly exhausted. I was at Bill's conference, his presentation and speech with the president of the Maldives on Monday, and you saw a lot of that come to fruition there. And they're not going anywhere. They're really on a roll and have been world changers. And so we're going to see them continue to collaborate with all of us.